I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Hello, welcome everybody to another episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. Today it's a solo episode. It's just me chatting with you. And it feels like it's been a while since I've got to do an episode on my own because I've had some amazing guests on the podcast with me recently. And we've had such amazing conversations that I've split the episodes up into 2 parts because I really want to stay true to my philosophy of making episodes short enough and still full of value, but short enough that you can listen to them on the school run or maybe while you're on a walk, because as busy parents, we don't get a lot of time away, and sometimes more than 20 or 30 minutes at a time just means that we don't end up doing it. So today I wanted to talk to you about what to do when you are handling a meltdown. This is a phrase I hear parents use a lot, a meltdown, and they can use it right from when their kids are little, like toddlers, right through to being teenagers. They'll say, he just has a meltdown if I ask him to do this or that or whatever. And I'm doing this today because speaking of fabulous guests, I have another guest coming up later in the year. Tammy Shalmoon, I think, is how you pronounce the name, and I will ask her that. But she is from the Institute of Child Psychology, and you may have listened to their amazing podcast, the Child Psych podcast. And Tammy, along with Tanya, who is at the Institute as well, have written a book called The Parenting Handbook. This is something I often think about. You know, it's that funny joke where we say, if only kids came with a manual like the washing machine, you know. And I say that to parents a lot, like we're all a bit lost without it. And sometimes I think or have these big visions of writing a handbook myself from all the things that I've learned over my 20 plus years in helping children and their families as a psychologist. But Tanya and Tammy have beat me to it. So the Parenting Handbook is actually fantastic. And I have done a few episodes where I review books because I do love to read and learn, but I've done the book as a whole. But this time I want to really break it down and talk through a couple. Basically, it's so that instead of giving you a book review where you can think, yes, I will read that book, or no, it's not for me, I'll actually go through the things that are in the book so we can, without having to go away and read it, you can learn from some of the content in there, because I think that might be a more useful thing for you as a parent. And so their book's fantastic, which means there's a lot of gold in there that I can talk about over probably a couple of episodes. And what they've really done is great in the book, where they are using lots of the science of child development and child psychology, but within the chapter, then they're also giving some examples of what these skills might look like if you are putting them into place. And then they also give a bit of a tip sheet at the end for things you can implement so that you don't have to remember them. You can use the tip sheet. And so there's a lot of awesome chapters in there. The first one is about brain biology, and it's all about the brain biology of parenting. So it means it's not just your child's brain, but also what's happening in your own brain in those moments as well. But I wanted to focus on one particular point today because it's the thing I think that can help when you're thinking about your child having a meltdown. It's a useful approach to use in that moment to prevent the meltdown from escalating further. So always I say in all my programs and with parents that most of what you do will be to prevent behaviors from happening, but there will still be times when they do happen. And that's not the time at which you need to teach your kids how to behave. It's really just about keeping a lid on the situation, preventing it from exploding or getting bigger, and keeping everybody safe. And there's a really good idea in the book where they talk about brain processing, and I really love the simplicity of the analogy. So they talk about the brain. I'll explain a bit about the brain biology first, and then what the strategy is to use. They talk about how the brain develops gradually, and it does. We go through this period of really early growth where there's a lot of changes happening from when kids are 0 to 2. Things then slow down a lot through middle childhood. And that's why we have children so long compared to other animals. We use our brains a lot compared to other mammals, and so that means there's a lot of time that's required for that brain to develop. And while that's happening, it starts from, they talk about it as in really simple ways, which I'll use for you because they kind of take out that jargon of the neurobiology of it. But they kind of talk about how at first what develops is the body brain. So that's all about the stuff that maintains us, physiologically. So breathing, heart beating, all of that kind of stuff. Then they talk about the feeling brain. So that's about emotional development and feeling, I guess, connected and wired with parents. And then the last bit to develop is the thinking brain. So that's the capacity to problem solve and learn and think things through. And so sometimes what happens, those things develop gradually over time, but essentially we've got that the body brain at the bottom, which is all about safety, the emotional brain that's all about the connection, and then the thinking brain, which is all about, am I capable of this and am I competent? It's really judging on that thinking level. So you may have heard that this idea too of Maslow's needs, he is a researcher that developed a hierarchy of needs, which is really the idea that we need our basic needs to be met before we can meet a higher order needs. So think of it in terms of, if you're lost in another country, you don't have shelter, you don't have money for food, and all of that kind of stuff, you're not going to be wondering about, existential or philosophy kind of issues at that point. You're going to be wondering about food and shelter. We've got to make sure the basics are met first. What the book talks about is how sometimes when our kids are having meltdowns, we reach them at that top level first. So if for example, if it's a kid who's, I can't even think they want something at the shops and you've said no. They're like, I want it, give me that. And you come in with the thinking like, no, I've said no. You already have one of those at home. You don't need another one. It costs a lot of money. You're using that really higher level reasoning or thinking strategy with kids, with your kid at that moment. Or maybe it's with a teenager who's saying that, they want to go to something on the weekend, and you're like, but you have an assignment, you haven't done it yet. So, what's going to happen with your grades? And you remember how you wanted to do that course at university, and how are you going to get in if you don't get the grade? And maybe you're doing a lot of that reasoning and thinking. So that's what we would describe as top-down processing. So we're kind of starting at the top, working on the thinking and expecting that's going to calm down and regulate the emotional part of our child and that body part. So if you've ever, I'm assuming all parents have, all kids have had a tantrum at least once during their lives. You see it when they're little. It's incredibly it involves the body quite a lot. They're crying, they're yelling, they get hot and bothered, their heart beats fast. So it's not just the emotions that is involved, but it is the body as well. So I think what this book talks about and explains really nicely is the way to do it from a more bottom-up approach. And they talk about it in terms of, I guess they go into a lot of the science about it, but really what I like how they've simplified it down quite a lot and talk about the first thing to do is, connecting with your child is from that body level is thinking, am I safe? So they kind of want to think about, they encourage you to think, or, sitting next to your child and making sure you're giving them messages about their safety to start with. So that might be, for example, they do give some examples. So if they're having a tantrum, you may want to sit near them or shield them from other people watching. If it's your teen losing the plot and their siblings are around, you might ask, can you guys move away and just give us a minute? Because it's about providing that safety to your child so that they know they're not being watched or judged or, any of that kind of thing. They then talk about using approaching them at that feeling brain level. And so that's where you want to reflect back the feelings to them. So acknowledging that you see their emotions and that you hear them and understand them. I talk about that as active listening in the programs I do with parents, and that's a big part of our supporting your ADHD teen program as well. And it's really about just reflecting back. So, for example, in that situation of your teen who can't go, you might be saying, you're feeling really frustrated. You're angry that you can't go. Or the kid in the shopping centre might be you're angry and you might be feeling sad too. So you're just acknowledging them where they're at that moment. So by having them feel safe, then having them be emotionally supported, then you might be able to move on to that thinking phase. And so that might be more along the lines of, also once they've calmed down quite a lot. So it might be to your little toddler in the supermarket or the toy store, I know you really wanted that thing. Maybe we can get one next time, or your birthday's coming up, or let's go to the toy library, or let's borrow something, or whatever. And with your teenager, then it might be, maybe we can sit down together and I can help you plan out the assignment, and then you'll have some time for something fun to do. So I think it's not really a new strategy, and it's one that is included a lot in the programs that I do, but I think it's really helpful to have something quick and easy to refer to in the moment. So I think the idea I really want to get across is that when you are in those situations of a meltdown, think about doing things rather from coming from that thinking point of view, which is the highest skill. Really think about helping them with the base skills first. So it's the body, then the feelings, then the thinking. And so the questions they use in the book to guide that is first thinking to your kid, like, are they safe? And then, are they loved? And then focusing on the thinking, like, can we solve this together? I did want to quickly touch on the fact that I don't know, it floors me, I think, because having done this for years, I read something like that so simple and think, wow, that's a great way to really summarize so many things our kids need, but in a simple 3-step process we can do when they're losing it, because it stops us from losing it as well. But what it also struck me as I was reading the book is how useful it is for parents to read about the brain and be able to understand what their kid's going through in those times. And it really highlights for me why I've got such an important module in the Supporting Your ADHD Teenager program, which is all about understanding the ADHD brain. And I think that's because then it gives that same understanding that this book has given parents. Because I think until you can understand what's going on for your child and what they're experiencing and how their brain has developed, you don't understand why certain strategies will work or won't work. Until you can kind of get their brain, I think that frustration is always going to be there, because your expectations are a little bit off, and you end up banging your head against the wall a lot because not only are your expectations off, so you're frustrated, but you're using strategies that probably aren't going to work because they're just not matched with your child's brain. So we do spend an entire module going over how the ADHD brain is different, with the goal that, then you were probably feeling really overwhelmed and unsure about what to do. But by understanding your child and their brain, you can then feel really confident that you get them, you know them, and you know then that the strategies you're putting in place, you'll know whether they're the right ones or not, because you'll understand the kind of brain that you're trying to apply them to. So it can help you be really clear on your strategies, and whether they're going to work. The other thing I wanted to mention too, though, is so I guess my reminder there is, if your child does have ADHD and that's what you're finding difficult, the How to Support Your ADHD Teenager program is going to be a really great resource for you to be able to go from being overwhelmed to confident, because you'll learn all of these strategies. But what's different, I think, is that sometimes in reading a book, and this book is fantastic, and there are a lot out there that aren't as easy, sometimes we're still left not knowing how to actually implement the strategies or to try them. And so that's a really important part of the work I do as well, is working together to tailor solutions for your own individual child and your family. And that for me is the difference about why, there's lots of information out there already, but why is it so hard for parents? And it's because putting it into place and applying it to your own child is often the sticking point. So that's a really important part of my programs. And I think it has the secondary benefit too of taking you from feeling isolated and alone, to really feeling supported, to be able to put these strategies in place, but also to be able to problem solve them, and tweak them and tailor them for your family. So you're not just trying it, didn't work, well, that was useless. So that's the difference, I think, connecting with a person can make, over reading books, although I love books so much. So I wanted to also provide a bit of a resource based on this for families today, because this parenting handbook has been awesome and it talks about brain biology, but it doesn't talk about ADHD. So I've created a free download for you. It's actually something I'll be putting on my website, available for lots of people. But because you're listening, you can put in the code Parent Like a Psychologist. So that's the name of this podcast, and it will let you download it for free. And so it's called ADHD Brains. So it's all about how ADHD brains are different, and by understanding that, it will help you understand why those traditional strategies can fall a bit short, parenting your ADHD kid, right through from little to teens. So that is at leannetran.com.au/ADHD brains. And again, the code you can use to get that for free is Parent Like a Psychologist. So all lowercase, no spaces. And If it doesn't work, just reach out on the website, because once you do, I can easily sort it out for you, which means I'll ask somebody who knows how the tech works and they will sort it out for you. So in summary today, I guess it's about remembering to meet your child with their base needs. So making sure they feel safe, and then making sure they feel loved, and then tackling the problem together when they're having a meltdown. So brain, feelings, thinking. That's the 3 things to try to remember when your kid is having a meltdown. And I hope it helps it end up in a much smoother solution for you. As always, let me know how you go. Leanne Trans Psychology on Instagram, or you can just send a DM or email me on the website. And if you got any challenges, let me know, because I can talk about that as well. Thanks so much for joining me again. I'll speak with you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Trans Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.